Good afternoon. Hello, my name's Philip and I'm a librarian at Salisbury Library, and welcome to this afternoon's Reading Friends activity, tea and chat. And we've got some poems and I've got some conversation for you about Salisbury and a few things to tell you about the library. And hopefully on this lovely afternoon you're able to relax, have a cup of tea with me and just listen to a few readings. A bit of prose and a bit of poetry, things that will get you thinking and perhaps you will enjoy on this lovely afternoon. So I always like a good comic poem to start, and one of my favourite, and I think I might have read it before but it's really good, is Lewis Carroll, and it's The Walrus and the Carpenter. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright, and this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It was very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. The sea was wet as wet could be, the sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead, there were no birds to fly. The Walrus and the Carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If this was only cleared away, they said it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year, do you suppose, the Walrus said, that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the Carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. Oh, oysters, come and walk with us, the Walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk, along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4, to give a hand to each. The eldest oyster looked to him, but not a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, you know, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4, and thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The Walrus and the Carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock conveniently low, and all the little oysters stood and waited in a row. The time has come, the Walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and chips and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. But wait a bit, the oysters cried, before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath and all of us are fat. No hurry, said the Carpenter, they thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the Walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides are very good indeed. Now if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed. But not on us, the oysters cried, turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do. The night is fine, the Walrus said. Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice. The Carpenter said nothing, but cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice. It seems a shame, the Walrus said, to play them such a trick, after we brought them out so far and made them trot so quick. The Carpenter said nothing, but the butters spread too thick. I weep for you, the Walrus said, I deeply sympathise. With sobs and tears he sorted out those of the larger size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. Oh, oysters, said the Carpenter, you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again? But answer came there none, and this was scarcely odd because they'd eaten every one. Poor old oysters. Never mind, there we go. So moving from the sea, moving inland, might interest you. And this is from the yearbook of the Salisbury Poetry Circle. And this goes back to 1967-68, so well over 50 years. And there are poems in here from local people. But there's also an introduction from someone called Elizabeth Walsh, and she's written a piece based on a pamphlet written in 1623 by John Taylor, the poet and social reformer. And it was called A New Discovery by Sea, with a Wherry from London to Salisbury. And bearing in mind this is in 1623, this is what John Taylor discovered about Salisbury. In the late summer of 1623, John Taylor, the water poet, visited the city of New Sarum. His arrival was unusual, for instead of coming by road, he came up the River Avon from Christchurch Harbour, having rowed all the way from London. With him were two Salisbury men, Gregory and Thomas Estable, who had left the city to work as watermen on the Thames. They had not wanted to go to London, but could not find any work in Salisbury, which then had 3,000 unemployed. The Estables met John Taylor in a London tavern, and the poet, who also took a great interest in unemployment, suggested that if only the citizens of Salisbury would clear the River Avon, they could export their grain and livestock by water to London and carry back fuel and other necessities on the return voyage. To prove his point, John Taylor, with the Estables and two London watermen from Lambeth, left Temple Stairs in mid-July. On the way they had many adventures and went sightseeing on the Isle of Wight. Finally they arrived at Christchurch Harbour. There John Taylor talked to the authorities about his scheme and was heartened by their interest, and with their help he loaded some New Forest timber onto the wherry and began the voyage up the Avon. 2,000 swans, like so many pilots, swam in the deepest places before me and showed me the way, and I came to the town of Ringwood. So wrote John Taylor in his pamphlet. At Ringwood he met two friends who, being royal trumpeters, provided some stirring music to speed them on their way to Fordingbridge. At Hale, the poet presented a letter of introduction to Sir Thomas Penruddock, who rode some way with him to inspect his reach of the river. He also gave John Taylor a letter addressed to Lord Edward George, Lord Baron of Dunelake, who lived at Longford. Lord Edward was also interested, and Taylor took another letter to the Earl of Pembroke. The River Avon was in poor condition, and weeds and weirs and mills obstructed their progress, and several mill owners were extremely angry when they learnt the purpose of their voyage, fearing that the mills and weirs would be destroyed if the river was made navigable. It was Friday when we brought our boat through Fishton Bridge on the west side of the city, and so ended a voyage to the west, the worst, the best, that here was expressed. John Taylor wrote those lines at the King's Head pub, where the Estable brothers Richard was innkeeper. Through him the poet met the mayor, one Master Squib, and other city worthies, to whom he explained his plan for Salisbury. They listened politely but were unimpressed. Hoping to rouse them, Taylor set off on foot to Wilton to see the Earl of Pembroke, but he was as unimpressed as the mayor of Salisbury. The poet was not a man to waste his time by fruitless efforts to improve the lot of the unemployed of New Sarum. He collected the Lambeth watermen, and they returned to London by horse, leaving the wherry with the Eastables, who still hoped their fellow citizens would eventually clear the River Avon. Taylor knew they would never do so, and his mission had failed, but then he was used to disappointment, for many of his bright ideas went awry. So that was from a pamphlet that Elizabeth Walsh summarised in the Poetry Circle 1967-68. The original pamphlet was written in 1623 by John Taylor, the poet and social reformer, and it was called A New Discovery by Sea, with a wherry from London to Salisbury. Ironically, there's plenty of things blocking the river in Salisbury at the moment as the redevelopment goes on, so hopefully by the end of it it will be clear, and I'm not sure about navigable, but it will be worth seeing by the time all the work is finished. Okay, so it's the time of year where it gets quite warm, and you might like a little drink from time to time, and particularly cider. Our local pub has lots of different ciders. You seem to be able to get any sort of flavoured cider these days. But I've got a poem here from Thomas Hardy, and I know a lot of Thomas Hardy's poems can be characterised as being perhaps a bit serious and miserable, but this one is quite a joyful poem, and it's called Great Things. Sweet cider is a great thing to me, spinning down to Weymouth town by Ridgeway thirstily, and maid and mistress summoning who tend the hostelry. Oh, cider is a great thing to me. The dance is a great thing to me, with candles lit and partners fit for night-long revelry, and going home when day dawning peeps pale upon the lea. Oh, dancing is a great thing to me. Love is yea a great thing to me, when having drawn across the lawn in darkness silently, a figure flits like one a wing out from the nearest tree. Oh, love is yes a great thing to me. Will these be always great things to me? Let it befall that one will call, soul, I have need of thee. What then joy jaunts in passioned flings, love and its ecstasy, will always be of great things to me. I think Thomas Hardy was talking about a good night out there, don't you? With his cider down to Weymouth. Okay. Now, this last weekend, in fact, the last couple of weekends has been the last weekend of the football season, and there's been some amazing matches and impressive results, and matches that have gone to extra time, and teams that have come back from 4-0 down to draw 4-4 and win on penalties. And I think if you're involved in any sort of sport or any sort of competitive endeavour, part of your thinking is always important about how positive you are about thinking about whether you're going to win or not. And sometimes you just know you're not in the right frame of mind, and often that's when you lose because you think you're going to. But there's a nice little poem here by Walter de Wintle, and it's called Thinking. If you think you're beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win but think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost, for out of the world we find success begins with a fellow's will, it's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but sooner or later the man who wins is the one who thinks he can. And that was Thinking by Walter de Wintle, emphasising the important role in sport and any other competitive endeavour of positive thinking. I quite like that poem. Okay, let's have another favourite poem I like that makes me laugh. When I was in London last, we went to Regent's Park and we walked past London Zoo, and it's always a bit odd, I think, in Regent's Park where you can actually not pay to go into the zoo, but you can walk past and there's, I don't know, a tapir or an antelope or a bird or something really odd just the other side of some railings. And it always reminds me of a famous poem that I heard when I was a child, and it's by Marriott, Edgar, and it's called The Lion and Albert. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool that's noted for fresh air and fun, and Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. A grand little lad was young Albert, all dressed in his best, quite a swell, with a stick with a horse's head handle, the finest that Walrus could sell. They didn't think much of the ocean, the waves they were fiddling and small. There were no wrecks and nobody drowned, in fact nothing to laugh at all. So seeking for further amusement, they paid and went into the zoo, where they'd lions and tigers and camels and old owls and sandwiches too. There was one great big lion called Walrus, his nose all covered with scars. He lay in a somnolent posture, with the side of his face on the bars. Now Albert had heard about lions, how they were ferocious and wild. To see Walrus lying so peaceful, well, it didn't seem right to the child. So straight away the brave little fellow, not showing a morsel of fear, took his stick with his horse's head handle and pushed it in Walrus's ear. You could see the lion didn't like it, for giving a kind of roll, he pulled Albert inside the cage with him and swallowed the little lad whole. Then Pa, who'd seen the occurrence, and didn't want to know what to do next, said, "Mother, your lion's at Albert." And Mother said, "Well, I am vexed." Then Mr. and Mrs. Rambotham, quite rightly when all was said and done, complained to the animal keeper that a lion had eaten their son. The keeper was quite nice about it. He said, "What a nasty mishap. Are you sure that it's your boy he's eaten?" Pa said, "Am I sure? There's his cap." The manager had to be sent for. He came and he said, "What's to do?" Pa said, "Your lion's at Albert, and him in his Sunday clothes too." Then Mother said, right, young fellow, I think it's a shame and a sin for a lion to go and eat Albert, and after we've paid to come in." The manager wanted no trouble. He took out his purse right away, saying how much to settle the matter, and Pa said, "What do you usually pay?" But Mother had turned a bit awkward when she thought her Albert had gone. She said, "No, someone's got to be summoned," so that was decided upon. Then off they went to the police station in front of the magistrate chap. They told him what happened to Albert and proved it by showing his cap. The magistrate gave his opinion that no one was really to blame, and he said he hoped the Ramsbottoms would have further sons to their name. At that Mother got proper blazing, and "Thank you so kindly," said she. "What waste our all lives raising children to feed ruddy lions? Not me." That always made me laugh when I was a boy, but also made me slightly worried, I have to admit. But so that was A Lion and Albert by Marriott, Edgar. Okay, so I thought I'd just tell you a little bit now about a few things that are going on at the library. So at the moment we've just got a new exhibition into Gallery 4 by Plain Arts, and there's some lovely paintings, and there's some quilts and some lovely glass work, a whole variety of materials that are worth looking at, and that exhibition is open during library opening hours. For those of you who like listening to people reading or poetry and prose, we have a shared reading group, and this meets on the 2nd and 4th Thursday of the month at 11 a.m. You don't have to do anything, you don't have to prepare, you just come along, and our two lovely volunteers, Dickie and Judith, they will share some poetry and prose with you, and it's a lovely talking group, tea and coffee served, and perhaps little biscuits. That's quite nice. It's on the 2nd and 4th Thursday of the month at 11 a.m. and it's free. If you can't get in at all, we've got some online services which might interest you. So we've got e-books and e-audio and e-magazines, and all you need is a library card and a PIN number to access that, and you can join remotely online, and then we can sort out the card for you. You can also access something called Naxos, which is Naxos Music and Naxos Spoken Word, and again that has lots of poetry and prose and plays that you can listen to and stream them to your device. That's also worth looking at. Okay, so another hardy one I thought, has this lot of connections with Salisbury. In fact, Hardy wrote about the very building I'm sitting in now, which is of course the library, but before it was the library it was the Market House, and the Market House featured in Jude the Obscure. But he also wrote a couple of poems about Salisbury, and this one is called In a Cathedral City. These people have not heard your name, no loungers in this placid place have helped to bruit your beauty's fame. The grey cathedral towards whose face bent eyes untold has met not yours, your shade has never swept its base. Your form has never darked its doors, nor have your faultless feet once thrown a pensive pit-pat on its floors. Along the street to maids well known, blithe lovers hum their tender airs, but in your praise voice not a tone, since naught bespeaks you here or bears, as are your imprints through and through. Here might I rest till my heart shares the spot's unconsciousness of you. That was a poem written about Salisbury Cathedral, and that was by Thomas Hardy. Okay, so I've got a final couple of poems to read to you, and I thought we'd try a bit of John Donne, and this is No Man is an Island. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clog be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manner of thy friends, or of thine own were, any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bowl tells, it tolls for thee. That was No Man is an Island by Donne. Okay, well I hope you've enjoyed the selection of poems this afternoon and prose. We've had quite a wide selection, and I'll try and put the details of what I've read later on the Facebook page. I thought what I'd finish with is a few limericks from Edward Lear. They're always worth a smile. There was an old man in a boat who said, I'm afloat, I'm afloat. When they said, no you ain't, he was ready to faint, that unhappy old man in a boat. There was an old man of Toulouse who purchased a new pair of shoes. When they asked him the pleasant, he said not at present, that turbid old man of Toulouse. There was a young lady of Portugal whose ideas were excessively nautical. She climbed up a tree to examine the sea, but declared she would never leave Portugal. There was an old man of Hong Kong who never did anything wrong. He lay on his back with his head in a sack, that innocuous old man of Hong Kong. And finally, there was an old man with a beard who said, it's just as I feared. 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren have all built their nests in my beard. There we go. Well, I hope you enjoyed that selection. Don't forget that all our libraries are open over half term, and there's plenty of activities and events going on. At Salisbury we've got a trail for the children around the library, and I know there are lots of activities and events at other libraries, so if you have a look at their Facebook pages you'll be able to find out more about them. In the meantime, one of my colleagues will be with you next month for more tea and chat, for more poetry, so look out on the Facebook pages for that. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you have a good afternoon. Bye!